We are going to leverage Spring Data JPA framework to connect with the database from our Java code. Let's try to understand what is this framework, why we should use it, how it is going to help the developers. As I said before, under the Spring ecosystem, there are good amount of projects. We already started exploring about the Spring Boot framework. Now, as a next step, we are going to explore the Spring Data framework or Spring Data projects as well. Let me click on this Spring Data. Under this Spring Data project, there are other sub-projects like Spring Data JPA, Spring Data MongoDB, Spring Data Redis, Spring Data Couchbase, Spring Data Elasticsearch, Spring Data Neo4j. As you can see, there are a good amount of sub-projects around the Spring Data. I'm going to explain the purpose of all these sub-projects along with the relationship between Spring Data and its sub-projects. But before we try to understand Spring Data and its sub-projects, first let me explain what is the process that developers they used to follow to interact with the database using Java code before the invention of Spring and Spring Boot frameworks. As you can see, these are the steps that developers they used to follow to interact with the database from their Java code. To perform all these steps, developers they will take help from one of the Java library with the name JDBC. JDBC means Java Database Connectivity. With the help of this JDBC library, they used to write a lot of code to connect with the database and to perform some database operations. Even today, if you try to use Spring Data JPA, behind the scenes, it is going to use JDBC libraries only. It's just that these frameworks, they abstracted all these steps from the developer. What are these steps? Let's try to understand one by one. Developers, they need to write some Java code to establish a connection with the database that they want to interact. As part of the logic under this step, they are going to provide URL details, username and password details to the JDBC library. And JDBC library, it is going to return a connection object which represents the connection with a specific database. Once the connection is established, as a second step, developers they have to create an SQL statement which they want to execute against a database using the connection that they established in the previous step. This is like literally writing select statement or insert statement or delete or update statements inside the Java code. Once the SQL statement is ready, the same SQL statement needs to be executed against the database connection created in the step 1. Once the query is executed, the database it is going to return the results. Obviously, whatever raw data that the database is going to return to the JDBC library, our Java code cannot understand. Our Java code can only understand and interact with the Java objects. That's why developers they used to write a lot of code to process the results. When I say process the result, they are going to iterate or they are going to loop all the results returned by the database, and each of the record present inside the results, they are going to convert into a POJO object. Once the results are converted into POJO objects, the other business logic is going to be executed. And towards the end, developers they should also take care of closing the connection that they have opened in the very first step and closing any other resources that they opened during all these steps. In case if there are any exception happen during any of these steps, developers they should handle the exceptions properly and they need to make sure the rollback of the database transaction is also happening. Do you see how painful it is to interact with a database by using plain JDBC library? This is where frameworks like Spring Data JPA they are going to shine and help the developers. When you are using Spring Data JPA, you don't have to develop code handling all these steps. Behind the scenes, Spring Data JPA framework is going to take care. As a developer, we just have to give some configurations or inputs to the framework on how our tables are structured, what are the database connection details, what is the SQL criteria that we want to execute. All such basic details if we can provide, Spring Data JPA can perform magic behind the scenes. We're going to see all the magics of Spring Data JPA throughout this course. I hope you are excited.